Hey everyone, this is Dr. Summer Watson coming at you from Core Women. So today I want to talk to you about social media content, authenticity, and disclosure. I've been thinking a lot today and in the last few days about these three factors. Today was one of those cold, windy fall days where I could do a little introspection and think about those three factors. And they're really very important to me because number one, we've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these social media platforms, and we want to think about content. We're constantly thinking about content as entrepreneurs and as self-starters. And what I want is to not put empty content out there. I want to make sure that what I put out there is content that you can utilize and apply to your life, increase your personal skills. So by doing that, you also need to get to know me and trust, some of the things that I put out there. And I think that's really hard when we're at a distance and we're looking at things through a phone or through a computer or through a, whatever means you're looking at the social media content through. And so my other issue that I wanted to address was, authenticity and disclosure. So through disclosure, you as human beings, most of the time can gauge, even from a distance, how authentic someone might be. So because I haven't had the opportunity all that much to disclose some of my story, and I go back and forth about how much I am going to disclose, and there are multiple factors as to why. It's not because, I'm fearful or because, I don't want you to know my story. As a matter of fact, I do want you to know my story. I want to share that story. So maybe that, we all have a journey to share because maybe something I say or somebody else says will resonate with you. And maybe if it resonates with you, you'll be able to take those skills and apply them or apply your experiences and how you perceive those experiences to the next situation where you may need to apply those skills to, a difficult situation or situation where it becomes more complex or whatever the case may be. So, I'm going to take you back to when I was 6 months old because this is the beginning of my journey. And I take you back to 6 months in particular because when I was 6 months old, I had a hole in my small intestine. And my mother kept taking me back and forth to the doctor saying, hey, she's sick. They're saying, go away. She's got the flu. This is way back when, many decades ago. And so anyway, my mom goes away and she's like, my baby's still sick and what is wrong with her? So one day I get really sick because I'm going into septic shock because all my food is going through that hole through my small intestine. So my mom races me to the hospital. They take me into exploratory surgery. I go into a coma and, they find out I have a hole and that I'm being poisoned by the food that I'm eating essentially. And again, like I said, this is years and years ago. So, what kind of, things were they assessing me with and how were they assessing me, except that they finally had to go and do exploratory surgery. So once they did that, they found out the issue. Luckily, I came out of the coma, but it took multiple surgeries. And quite frankly, the doctors were at the end of their options. And one day my mom walks into the hospital room and sees 4 or 5 of the doctors on the team of doctors that were working on me all around in a circle around the crib. And my mom said I had, my wrists tied down, my feet tied down, tubes everywhere because, I couldn't flail and pull the tubes out or accidentally do these things. So that's why the legs and arms had to be tied down. And so she said, they were around the crib and just praying because there was nothing else they could do for me. And so, in a way, she always said, you're my miracle baby. So from that, I think about that and think there's a purpose. There's a purpose for me. There's a purpose for you. There's a purpose for all of us for being here on this earth. And so, so that's part of my journey as the story progresses, and life goes on. I have multiple issues because as I grow, the adhesions or buildup of tissue grows within my abdomen. And so what that means is things start restricting my organs and constricting this and doing that. And so I end up having to have multiple surgeries throughout my life. And, I still go off to college, and you've got to remember that's just a physical issue, but I was able to overcome it from 6 months of age up through, today. And so, that doesn't include, as I said, the other issues that were going on. So I had a father that was abusive towards women and his children, a mother who was very inspirational and empowering up until I graduated from high school, where she had empty nest syndrome and then turned to drugs. And so I was racing back and forth from college, making sure my mom was okay as I was trying to go to college. And I worked 30 hours a week and took 17 units and was part of a sorority and did all these things. And prior to that, when I was 15, my parents weren't terribly financially, in a bad situation or a negative situation. They were doing fine. However, they wanted to instill in me that I needed to work. So at 15 and a half, I started working, and I was a bit resentful because I'd look around and say, my peers who I was going to private school with were not working, didn't have to work. But I look back on it now and say, I'm glad my parents did that, because that instilled, a work ethic. I had a purpose at that time in my life as well. It did give me a purpose. And I noticed, like, working with clients now, and even with veterans, if they're lacking a purpose, then they begin to sometimes depress. So, from that experience, I'm so glad my parents, instilled in me that, you've got to work, and you've got to work hard, and you've got to have a plan. So that work ethic was instilled very early on with me. And so moving forward, I graduate from college. I, decide to apply for law school. I get into law school, and mind you, I'm dating somebody starting the senior year of my high school career, pretty steadily, but I still wanted to go away to college and then go to law school, because I wasn't going to give up my own personal goals at that time to foster a young relationship like that, because I knew I always had my own personal goals. And I think that's okay, because you can still love somebody from a distance. So I ended up going off to law school. In a few months, almost a year into that, I decided, you know what? This is not something that I want to do. This was a really hard decision, because I, at the time I was 22, 23, and I thought, boy, am I failing? Am I failing my family? Am I failing myself? And I recently talked to an MD who went all the way through med school, and she made the same decision of, I don't want to be a practitioner. That's not what I want to do. Yet we have to choose our own path and our own journey. So I chose not to go on to law school, and I went home, and that was tough. And I my boyfriend and I connected, and he joined the military, and then we ended up getting married. And so our first duty station was in San Diego. So once we moved to San Diego, I decided, you know what? I really want to go back to school. I love school. School was my safe place. I could always count on school to be the stable. And so I ended up going into human services. So I got a degree in community-based counseling, program development, organizational development, as well as counseling individuals, families, and groups. So that being said, I was able to go out into the community and counsel and create programs and, help the organization grow. And then I also worked in human services and social services, doing case management. And then we get shipped to our next duty station, which was Sacramento, where I ended up working in a very clinical setting assessing people who are suicidal, homicidal, and gravely disabled, which I absolutely loved. I did triage, I did a lot of different things, and I love that job. But of course, my husband's in the military, we get transferred again. So with that said, every single move, I had to transition. I had to reinvent certain things to find a different type of job or a new job, or, and so as military spouses, we become very resilient and very transitional, and we learn how to roll with that transition. And so with that said, I was able to later help veterans who had been in the military for 5, 10, 15, 30 years, who had been in a job for that long, didn't even know how to make a resume, help them transition better and more effectively. So getting back to my journey, so we end up going back to San Diego, and then from there, I start my doctorate. I finish my doctorate, tail end of my doctorate. Of course, what happens? I'm back in the hospital, and I'm working at this time too, back in the hospital with bunch of adhesions again. So they got to go in there. It takes 7.5 hours for them to peel back all of this tissue. And what they decide to do while they're in there is she needs a complete hysterectomy because nobody can ever go back into her stomach. So I get out, I find out I have a complete hysterectomy, and that means no kids, no natural kids. So, my own biological kids. So, which is, kind of shocking immediately. And at the same time, I'm in the hospital. My hormones are growing crazy, and I'm trying to finish up my dissertation. I'm typing in my hospital bed, and, I'm trying to, and people are like, how are you doing this? I'm like, you got to get done. You got to get it done. I'm on a mission here. I've got my goals set. I've got my objectives, and I'm gonna absolutely fulfill this goal. So, and right after I get out of the hospital, right after I finish my doctorate, guess what? We get transferred again. And this time we get transferred overseas. So we are now in Japan for 3 years. And so the first year was a big challenge for me because I hadn't not ever worked. And I was trying to find a job, and we're on an island, a small island off Japan, mainland Japan. So I'm just challenging my husband, finally, like, hey, listen, you need to stop. So what I ended up doing is creating my own business over there. Something completely out of the realm of what I do or what I've ever done. And so that following year, my husband gets shipped off for a year, and he goes to war. And I'm on an island pulling duty there, and he's in Iraq pulling duty over there in a war. And many of us spouses were left, and we're on a small island. There's not as many resources as there are in mainland Japan or mainland United States, so we're all having to help each other out and support one another in our goals, in taking care of kids, their kids, even when I didn't have kids, I was, helping with PTO, Girl Scouts, because that's what we did. We came together as a community and we helped each other. So from there, my husband comes back. We have another year there. We end up getting transferred back to San Diego. We spend some time there, and then we get transferred to another duty station where I take a pay cut, like a 30% pay cut. I'm running 3 departments in a private psych hospital. And so finally, my husband retires after 20 something years, and we moved to Virginia. And I'm a California girl, so this is a culture shock for me. So we moved to Virginia, and quite frankly, we settle in. And this year I decide, you know what? I'm gonna do something I really want to do and I really love. And you know what that is? It's to empower other women. I've got the skills. I've got, the organizational program management skills. I have the clinical skills, but really this is not a clinical job. This is a non-clinical journey that I'm taking, because even though I deal with human beings on a daily basis, they need clinical expertise. I'm going to refer them out. However, I am your coach where we can strategize about what your personal and professional needs are, and I'm going to make the right referrals if need be. Otherwise, we're going to work with each other to achieve your goals by setting the right objectives and timelines and so much more. So, so in the last 7.5 months that I have established Core Women, I have been so thrilled with what I have accomplished. I set goals for myself, and that was to be a strategic empowerment coach, develop that practice, and then also to start a podcast, which I have, and I've already done 23 or 24 episodes. There are multiple episodes in the queue still waiting to be published, so I'm excited about that. Yeah. And this is something else I did. I also made the first film of a series of women empowerment films. So I also work with interns at a local university. And so I've been working with this one intern who moved to New York. He is also director. He's a young director. He's an actor. So I had him fly out with me to Los Angeles, and we made this film about women empowerment. And if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. The link's on the Core Women Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter page, and also on my Core Women website. So this is the first of a series of films that I will be making. And I have a lot more going on. I also run a nonprofit for veterans. So I work with interns, run a nonprofit for veterans, also do Core Women, which is my primary job. So, and I absolutely love it. So now, this is not empty content. Why? Because hopefully something I have said will resonate with you. Hopefully you have the opportunity, or you have gotten the opportunity to get to know me a little better. If you have any questions, comments, or if you just like the video, like it. But I want to hear from you. I share this because I hope some of my journey will resonate with you. If you need a strategic empowerment coach for women, I'm your gal. I also am a speaker, can come to speak to groups. But really, this is really about getting to know me. I wanted to put myself out there because even with my clinical training, where we don't do a lot of disclosure, I thought, you know what, I'm going to stop struggling with this, and I'm going to tell the folks a little bit about me. So maybe you have the opportunity to get to know me and to ask me questions. Okay, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. Take care.